alive because of her.
I was 27 years old, 4 months pregnant, and hiding in a locked bathroom while my husband screamed profanities through the door. My back was pressed against the cold cabinet beneath the sink, my knees pulled tight to my chest, my hands trembling so violently I couldn't feel my fingertips anymore. The smell of spilled whiskey seeped through the crack beneath the door, mixing with the copper taste of fear on my tongue. My unborn baby kicked inside me, a tiny flutter of life that reminded me I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I whispered into the darkness, barely loud enough to hear my own voice. God, I'm done. Please help me. I didn't believe anyone was listening. I didn't expect anything to happen. But what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about prayer, about miracles, and about the mysterious ways we are sometimes carried through the fire, literally. What I'm about to share with you is not something I tell lightly. For years, I kept this story buried inside me because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I had lost my mind. But I've learned that sometimes the stories we're most afraid to tell are the ones someone else desperately needs to hear. So if you're out there right now, feeling trapped in a situation that seems impossible, feeling like nobody sees you and nobody cares, feeling like you've prayed 1,000 prayers that went unanswered, I need you to stay with me until the end of this story. Because what happened to me that night in my burning bathroom taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life. Sometimes deliverance doesn't look like what we expect. Sometimes it comes disguised as an elderly neighbor in slippers. Sometimes the miracle isn't that the storm stops. It's that we're pulled from the wreckage just before the flames consume everything. My name is Sarah, and I need to tell you how I almost died, and how something I still can't fully explain saved my life and the life of my child. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the truth is, monsters don't reveal themselves on the first date. If they did, nobody would ever fall in love with them. The man I married was charming in a way that made me feel like I was standing in the center of a spotlight. His name was Daniel, and when I first met him, I thought I had found everything I had been searching for my entire life. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, where church bells rang every Sunday morning, and where my mother always told me that God had a plan for my life even when I couldn't see it. I believed her. I believed in love, in goodness, in the fairy tale endings I watched in movies. I believed that if I was kind enough, patient enough, loving enough, the universe would reward me with a life filled with happiness. Daniel walked into my life during the summer I turned 24. I was working at a bookstore downtown, spending my afternoons organizing shelves and recommending novels to customers who wandered in looking for something to fill their empty hours. He came in one Tuesday afternoon, asking for a recommendation, and when I handed him a worn copy of my favorite book, he looked at me like I had just given him something precious. "You have really kind eyes," he said. "I bet you don't hear that enough." Nobody had ever said something like that to me before. I felt my cheeks flush. I mumbled something awkward about the book, about how he should let me know if he liked it, and he smiled in a way that made my heart do something strange. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Each time he brought me coffee, remembered small details I had mentioned in passing, asked questions about my dreams and my fears and my favorite childhood memories. He listened in a way that made me feel seen for the first time in my life. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. Within 6 months, he proposed. Within a year, we were married in a small ceremony at the church where I had grown up, surrounded by family and friends who dabbed tears from their eyes and told me I was the luckiest girl in the world. I believed them. I had no idea I was walking into a cage disguised as a castle. The changes started slowly, so slowly I didn't recognize them for what they were. The first time Daniel commented on my outfit, I thought he was being protective. "That dress is a little short, don't you think? I just don't want other men looking at you the way I look at you." I changed into something longer and told myself it was sweet that he cared so much. The first time he checked my phone, I thought he was being playful. "Who's Michael?" he asked, scrolling through my text messages with a tight smile. Michael was a coworker, someone I barely spoke to, but Daniel's jaw clenched when I explained. I deleted the number and told myself it was easier to avoid the conflict. The first time he raised his voice at me, I thought he was just stressed. He had a difficult job, long hours, a boss who didn't appreciate him. When he shouted at me for forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning, I apologized profusely, cleaned up the dinner dishes in silence, and reminded myself that marriage required patience. Nobody was perfect. We all had bad days. But the bad days started happening more often. The cracks in the wall widened. Daniel began monitoring my whereabouts like a prison warden. He wanted to know where I was every minute of every day. He called my phone multiple times when I was at work, and if I didn't answer immediately, there would be a storm waiting for me when I got home. He decided which friends I could see, which turned out to be none of them, because every single person in my life was suddenly a bad influence who didn't understand our relationship. My best friend from college, Megan, was the first to go. Daniel said she was jealous of our marriage and was trying to poison my mind against him. My sister, Rebecca, was the next. Daniel claimed she had made a rude comment about him at a family dinner, and he couldn't trust anyone who would disrespect him like that. One by one, the people I loved were pushed out of my life until I looked around and realized I was completely alone. Daniel became the center of my universe, not because I wanted him to be, but because he had systematically removed everyone else from orbit. I told myself this was normal. I told myself all marriages had challenges. I told myself that if I just tried harder, loved better, became the wife he needed me to be, things would get easier. They didn't get easier. They got worse. The shouting became a regular occurrence. Daniel would come home from work already irritated, already looking for something to criticize. The chicken was too dry. The house wasn't clean enough. I had folded his shirts wrong. I had answered him with the wrong tone of voice. Everything I did was wrong, and his anger was always my fault. The first time he put his hands on me, I was so shocked I couldn't even cry. We were arguing about something stupid. I don't even remember what it was now. Maybe something about money or a bill I had forgotten to pay. And suddenly his hands were around my shoulders, slamming me against the wall so hard the picture frames rattled. His face was inches from mine, his breath hot with rage, and he hissed words I had never heard directed at me before. When he let me go, I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, shaking. He was pacing the room, running his hands through his hair, muttering to himself. Then he stopped, looked at me with tears in his eyes, and dropped to his knees beside me. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. You know I would never hurt you. You just pushed me so far, I lost control. It won't happen again. Please forgive me. Please don't leave. I'll be better. I promise I'll be better." I forgave him. I stayed. I wanted to believe him. And for a few weeks, things were good. He brought me flowers. He cooked me dinner. He held me at night and whispered that I was the love of his life, that he couldn't live without me, that he would die if I ever left him. But the peace never lasted. The cycle became predictable. Explosion, apology, honeymoon, tension, explosion. Over and over again, like a terrible dance I couldn't escape. Each time the explosions got worse. He shoved me into furniture. He threw objects at my head. He screamed so close to my face that his spit landed on my cheeks. And each time the apologies came with tears and gifts and promises that this time, he really would change. I stayed because I didn't know how to leave. I stayed because I had no one left to run to. I stayed because every time I got close to the front door, my body betrayed me. I can't explain the panic that overtook me whenever I thought about leaving. It was like drowning on dry land. My chest would tighten until I couldn't breathe. My hands would shake so violently I couldn't grip the doorknob. My legs would turn to stone, refusing to carry me forward. I would stand there, paralyzed, tears streaming down my face, and eventually I would whisper to myself, maybe tomorrow, maybe next time. And then I would back away from the door and crawl into bed and hate myself for being so weak. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought everything would change. I imagined that, when I told Daniel he was going to be a father, something would shift inside him. I imagined his face lighting up with joy, imagined him holding my belly with gentle hands, imagined him promising to become the man our child deserved. I imagined that this baby would be the key that unlocked the version of Daniel I had fallen in love with. I was so naive. I still remember the moment I told him. I had bought a little onesie that said Daddy's Little Miracle and wrapped it in a box with a bow. I was nervous but hopeful, so hopeful, as I watched him tear off the paper. When he saw what was inside, his face didn't light up. It darkened. He looked at me with something I can only describe as resentment. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice flat. "We're not ready for this. How could you let this happen?" I tried to explain that this was something we had talked about, that this was supposed to be a blessing, but he cut me off with a wave of his hand. He threw the onesie on the table and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there with tears running down my face and a broken heart shattering into pieces inside my chest. In the weeks that followed, I understood something terrible. Daniel didn't want this baby because the baby would steal the attention he believed he deserved. Everything became worse during my pregnancy. He grew more volatile, more unpredictable, more cruel. He made comments about my changing body that cut deeper than any blade. He complained that I was too tired, too emotional, too focused on that thing growing inside you. He resented every doctor's appointment, every craving I asked him to satisfy, every moment I spent thinking about the life we had created together. I became afraid to mention the baby at all. I hid my ultrasound photos. I stopped buying things for the nursery. I made myself as small and invisible as possible, hoping that if I disappeared into the background, his anger would have nothing to latch onto. But it always found me. The only light in my darkness during those months was a woman named Mrs. Ruth. She was my neighbor, an elderly widow in her 70s who lived in the small cottage next door. I didn't know much about her except that she had lost her husband years ago. She spent her mornings gardening, and she always smiled at me through the fence whenever our paths crossed. At first, I was afraid to talk to her. Daniel had made it clear that I wasn't supposed to have friends, and I was terrified of what would happen if he saw me getting too close to anyone. But Ruth had a way of reaching out that felt safe, quiet, almost invisible. Sometimes, when Daniel was at work, I would find a small package on my porch. Fresh muffins wrapped in a cloth napkin, or a jar of homemade jam with a ribbon around the lid. Sometimes I would check the mailbox and find a handwritten note tucked between the bills, written in shaky cursive on lavender paper. The notes always said simple things. "You are not alone. You are stronger than you know. Someone is praying for you." I never responded. I was too scared, but I kept every single note in a small box hidden in the back of my closet. On the nights when Daniel's rage left me crying on the bathroom floor, I would pull out those notes and read them over and over again, reminding myself that somewhere in the world, someone saw me. Someone cared. Someone hadn't forgotten I existed. Ruth became my lifeline without ever knowing it. And then came the night everything changed forever. It was a Thursday in October, cold enough that I could see my breath in the kitchen as I waited for Daniel to come home. I had made his favorite dinner, cleaned the house until it sparkled, put on the outfit he liked best, done everything I could think of to keep the peace. But when he walked through the door, I knew immediately that none of it would matter. He was drunk. Not just a little buzzed from a drink after work, but staggering, slurring, can barely stand drunk. The smell of whiskey hit me before he even crossed the threshold. His eyes were glassy and unfocused, and there was something in them that made every cell in my body scream at me to run. "What are you looking at?" he snarled, kicking the door shut behind him. "Nothing," I said quickly, keeping my voice soft and submissive. "I made dinner, it's on the table." He stumbled past me into the kitchen, picked up his plate, and took one bite. Then he threw it across the room. "It's cold," he spat. "You couldn't even keep my food warm. What do you do all day, Sarah? What is the point of you?" I tried to apologize. I tried to offer to heat it up, but he wasn't listening. He was pacing, muttering, building up to something terrible. "I work all day," he shouted, slamming his fist on the counter. "I bust my back to provide for you, and this is what I come home to? A cold dinner and a wife who looks at me like I'm some kind of monster." He grabbed a glass from the counter and hurled it at the wall next to my head. It shattered, and something inside me shattered with it. I ran. I didn't think, I just ran. I bolted down the hallway, hearing his heavy footsteps thundering behind me, and I threw myself into the bathroom and locked the door just as his body slammed against it. "Open this door," he screamed, pounding so hard the hinges rattled. "Open this door right now, or I swear to God, Sarah." I backed away until my spine hit the cabinet beneath the sink. I slid down to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, making myself as small as possible. My whole body was shaking. My teeth were chattering. I could hear him on the other side of the door, cursing, spitting, threatening, and all I could do was sit there and wait for whatever was going to happen next. The baby kicked. It was just a tiny flutter, a small movement inside my belly, but it broke something open in me. This wasn't just about me anymore. I was carrying a life inside me, a life that deserved a chance, a life that deserved better than this, a life that would grow up watching its mother cower on bathroom floors if I didn't find a way out. I pressed my hand against my belly and whispered through my tears, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm going to get us out of here. I promise." But I had made that promise before. I had made it 100 times. And every time, the panic had won. I closed my eyes and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I prayed. Not a formal prayer, not the kind I had learned in Sunday school. Just a desperate, broken whisper that barely made it past my lips. "God, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I don't even know if you're listening. I don't even know if you're real. But if you are, please, please help me. I can't save myself. I've tried and I can't. Please send someone. Please do something. Please don't let us die like this." I didn't feel anything when I said it. No warmth, no peace, no sign that anyone had heard. Just the sound of Daniel still pounding on the door, still shouting threats that made my blood run cold. And then, boom, boom, boom. A different sound. Not the bathroom door. The front door. Someone was pounding on the front door of the house, so loud and so forceful that the whole house seemed to shake with the impact. Daniel stopped mid-sentence. I heard him mutter, "Who the hell is that?" And then his footsteps stomped away down the hallway. I stayed frozen on the bathroom floor, barely breathing, straining to hear what was happening. The front door opened. And then a voice, thin, shaky, but unmistakably firm. "Daniel, it's Ruth from next door. I felt something was wrong. I need to talk to you." My heart stopped. What was she doing here? At this hour? She had to be crazy. She had to know how dangerous this was. But Daniel's voice changed instantly. The rage disappeared, replaced by the smooth, polished charm he always used in public. "Oh, Mrs. Ruth, I'm so sorry if we woke you. Everything's fine. My wife is just not feeling well. You know how pregnancy hormones can be." Ruth interrupted him. Her voice was quiet but sharp as glass. "I know what I heard, young man. Let's talk outside." There was a pause, a long, tense pause. And then I heard the front door close behind them. The house went silent. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I sat there on the cold bathroom floor, listening to my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, trying to understand what was happening. Minutes passed, maybe 2, maybe 5. Time had become meaningless. And then, a soft tapping at the bathroom window. I turned my head slowly, terrified of what I might see. The window was half open, letting in a sliver of cold October air. A wrinkled hand appeared from outside and slowly pushed it open the rest of the way. Ruth's face appeared in the darkness. Her silver hair was wild, like she had run outside without brushing it. She wasn't wearing shoes, just slippers that were caked with mud from crossing the yard. Her eyes were wide and urgent, but her voice was a steady whisper. "Sweetheart, climb out now. He won't be gone long. We need to go." I stared at her, paralyzed. Every time I had tried to leave before, my body had frozen. Every time I had reached for freedom, the panic had dragged me back. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the prayer still echoing in my chest. Maybe it was the baby kicking against my ribs, reminding me what I was fighting for. Maybe it was Ruth's eyes, filled with a certainty I couldn't explain, looking at me like she knew something I didn't. I moved. I grabbed my purse from the floor. I pushed aside the shampoo bottles on the window ledge. I climbed up onto the edge of the bathtub, squeezed myself through the narrow frame, and tumbled into the cold night air. Ruth caught me. Her arms were thin and frail, but she held me steady as I found my footing in the damp grass. She wrapped her shawl around my shoulders, a soft, worn thing that smelled like lavender and old books, and grabbed my hand. "Come on," she whispered. "My car is in the alley. We need to go before he realizes you're gone." We ran, or as close to running as a pregnant woman and a 70-year-old widow could manage. My bare feet slapped against the cold pavement. My lungs burned with every breath. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Daniel's silhouette charging after us, but the night was empty and still. Ruth's car was parked in the shadows of the alley behind her house, an old sedan that looked like it had seen better decades. She helped me into the passenger seat, slammed the door behind me, and rushed around to the driver's side. The engine sputtered to life. She pulled out of the alley without turning on the headlights, navigating the dark streets by memory alone. I sat in the passenger seat, shaking so violently I couldn't hold my purse still on my lap. My teeth were chattering. Tears were streaming down my face, but I wasn't even aware I was crying. Every nerve in my body was screaming with adrenaline and terror and something else I couldn't name. Ruth reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're okay," she said softly. "You're safe now, just breathe." I tried to breathe. The air came in ragged gasps. "How did you know?" I managed to ask between sobs. "How did you know to come?" She was quiet for a moment, her eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. "I don't know how to explain it," she finally said. "I was sitting on my couch, watching television, and suddenly I felt this pull, like someone had grabbed my shoulders and was shaking me awake. I heard something not with my ears, but deeper than that in my chest. A voice that said, 'Go now, she needs you.'" She glanced at me, her expression serious. "I didn't even put on my shoes. I just ran. I knew something was wrong. I knew you were in danger. And I knew I had to get you out of that house tonight." I didn't know what to say. I had prayed a desperate prayer, and minutes later, a 70-year-old woman in slippers had shown up at my door and pulled me through a window. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe something else. We drove to Ruth's house, a small cottage filled with overstuffed chairs, stacks of books, and the lingering smell of cinnamon. She helped me to the couch, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and pressed a cup of warm tea into my trembling hands. I sat there in silence, trying to process everything that had happened. And then we heard the sirens. At first, they were distant, just a faint wail somewhere across the neighborhood, but they grew louder and louder, until the night was filled with the screaming of emergency vehicles. Ruth walked to the window and pushed aside the curtain. Her face went pale. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "come here." I set down my tea and walked to her side on unsteady legs. What I saw through the window made my knees buckle. My house, the house I had lived in for 3 years, the house where I had cried myself to sleep more nights than I could count, the house where I had just been hiding on a bathroom floor, was on fire. Not just a small fire. An inferno. Flames were shooting through the windows, clawing at the night sky, casting orange and red shadows across the entire street. Fire trucks were parked along the curb, firefighters rushing with hoses and equipment, neighbors gathering in clusters on the sidewalk with their hands over their mouths. I couldn't breathe. Ruth put her arm around me. "The bathroom," I whispered. "I was just in the bathroom." She didn't say anything. She just held me tighter. Later, maybe an hour, maybe 2, a firefighter knocked on Ruth's door. He was young, probably not much older than me, with soot on his face and exhaustion in his eyes. "Are you the neighbors?" he asked. "We're checking if everyone on the block is accounted for." Ruth nodded. "We're fine, she gestured to me. "She was in that house. I got her out just before." The firefighter's expression changed. He looked at me with something I can only describe as disbelief. "You were in the house," he repeated. "When did you leave?" Maybe 15, 20 minutes before we heard the sirens, Ruth said. The firefighter shook his head slowly. Ma'am, we think the fire started from a faulty wire in the wall. The investigator hasn't confirmed it yet, but based on the burn pattern, it looks like the flames originated in the wall behind the bathroom. My stomach dropped. The bathroom I was hiding in, I asked, my voice cracking. He nodded, his face grave. The fire spread fastest in that area. If anyone had been in that bathroom when it started, they wouldn't have made it out. There's no other exit from that room except the window, and the window frame caught fire within minutes of the walls. The smoke alone would have been deadly. Ruth's arm tightened around me. By the time we got here, the firefighter continued, that side of the house was completely engulfed. Whoever got you out, they saved your life. He said a few more things, something about temporary housing, about contacting insurance, about trauma counseling, but I couldn't hear any of it. My ears were ringing. My mind was spinning. I had been sitting in that bathroom, praying a desperate prayer, when Ruth pounded on the door. I had climbed out of the window just minutes before a fire started in the wall behind me, a fire that would have trapped me, suffocated me, burned me alive. I pressed my hands against my belly. My baby kicked. Alive. Safe. How? How had this happened? I looked at Ruth, and she looked back at me, and I saw in her eyes the same question I was asking myself. You felt something, I said slowly. You heard a voice telling you to come. Yes. And you ran, without even putting on shoes. Yes. And you got me out of that bathroom, through that window, minutes before a fire started in the wall. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. Sarah, I've been alive for 73 years. I've seen a lot of things I couldn't explain, but I have never felt anything like what I felt tonight. Something woke me up. Something sent me to that house. I don't know if it was an angel or God himself or just an old woman's intuition gone into overdrive, but I know that I was supposed to be there, and I know that you were supposed to get out. I started crying again. Not from fear this time. From something else entirely. In the days that followed, I learned more about what had happened that night. Daniel had been so focused on charming Ruth on the front porch that he hadn't noticed me slipping out the bathroom window. By the time he went back inside to continue his tirade, I was already gone. When the fire started, investigators believe it was less than 10 minutes after I escaped. He ran out the front door screaming for help. He wasn't hurt, not physically. But when the police arrived, Ruth told them everything. About the screaming she'd heard through the walls for months. About the nights she'd watched me limping through my garden. About the fear in my eyes every time Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. They found evidence in the house, before it was completely destroyed, of what he had done to me. Broken glass, holes punched in walls, medical records I had hidden in a fireproof box. The story pieced itself together. Daniel was arrested that night. I never went back. For the first few weeks, I stayed with Ruth. She gave me her spare bedroom, a small, cozy room with floral wallpaper and a window that overlooked her garden, and she refused to let me pay rent or contribute to groceries. You're healing, she said simply. That's your only job right now. I did heal. Slowly, painfully, but surely. The first week, I barely left the bed. Every sound made me flinch. Every knock on the door sent my heart racing. I dreamed of fire, of Daniel's face, of bathroom doors splintering under the force of his rage. But Ruth was patient. She brought me tea every morning and sat with me while I drank it. She told me stories about her late husband, about the life they had built together, about the grandchildren who called her every Sunday. She read to me from her favorite books when the silence became too heavy. And slowly, the weight on my chest began to lift. My sister Rebecca was the first to come back into my life. She had been trying to reach me for months, but Daniel had blocked her number on my phone and intercepted her letters. When Ruth helped me make my first phone call to her, Rebecca sobbed so hard she couldn't speak. She drove 8 hours to see me, wrapped me in her arms, and promised she would never let me disappear again. My friend Megan came next, and my mother, and all the people I had lost during those dark years. They surrounded me like a wall, protecting me, reminding me who I had been before Daniel hollowed me out. I started therapy. I started eating again. I started taking walks in the sunshine and allowing myself to feel the warmth on my skin. And 5 months later, I gave birth to a little girl. I named her Grace. Not because it was a pretty name, though it is. Not because it was a family name, though my grandmother would have loved it. I named her Grace because that is exactly what she was. An undeserved gift. A second chance. A life that should have been taken in a fire but wasn't, because an old woman in slippers listened to a voice that told her to run. Holding Grace for the first time, I understood something I had struggled to believe for years. I was not alone. I had never been alone. Even in the darkest moments, even when Daniel was screaming through the bathroom door, even when I was locked in a burning house, even when I had given up hope, something was watching over me. Someone was holding space for me. A plan was in motion that I couldn't see. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was an angel. Maybe it was the collective love of every person who had ever prayed for me, including Ruth, including my sister, including my mother who had told me all those years ago that God had a purpose for my life even when I couldn't see it. I don't know the mechanics of miracles. I don't know how an elderly widow felt an invisible hand on her shoulders and knew to run to my window at exactly the right moment. I don't know how I summoned the strength to climb through that window when every other time I had been paralyzed with fear. But I know what happened, and I know what it meant. Daniel went to prison. He was sentenced to 8 years for assault and battery, and because of the severity of what he had done, he won't be eligible for parole for at least 6. I don't know what will happen when he gets out. I don't know if he will try to find me, but I do know that I am not the same woman who cowered on that bathroom floor. I have rebuilt myself from ashes, literally, and I will never let anyone make me feel worthless again. Ruth passed away 3 years after that night. It was peaceful. She went asleep one evening and simply didn't wake up. Her heart, the doctors said, had been weakening for years. She had lived long enough to see me graduate from a program for domestic violence survivors, long enough to hold baby Grace in her arms, long enough to know that what she did that night mattered. At her funeral, I stood in front of a small crowd of mourners and told the story I had never told anyone outside my family. I told them about the bathroom, about the prayer, about the knock on the door and the hand that appeared in the window, about the fire that started in the wall behind me and the escape that shouldn't have been possible, and the old woman in slippers who listened to a voice only she could hear. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. After the service, a woman approached me. She was young, maybe early 20s, with hollow eyes and long sleeves even though it was summer. "I'm in a situation," she said quietly, not meeting my gaze. "I don't know how to get out." I understood everything she wasn't saying. I took her hand, and I told her what Ruth had told me through all those notes hidden in my mailbox. "You are not alone. You are stronger than you know, and there are people who will help you if you let them." She cried. I cried. And that night, I made some phone calls and connected her with a shelter that had once helped me. That's the thing about being saved. It creates a responsibility. When someone pulls you out of a fire, you don't just walk away and forget. You spend the rest of your life looking for other people standing too close to the flames. So here I am, telling you this story. Maybe you're in your own bathroom right now, hiding behind a locked door, wondering if anyone will come. Maybe you're in a relationship that is slowly crushing the life out of you, and you've convinced yourself that this is just the way things are. Maybe you've prayed 1,000 prayers that seem to go unanswered, and you've started to believe that nobody is listening. I need you to hear me. Someone is listening. Help is coming. It might not look like what you expect. It might come through a window instead of a door. It might arrive in slippers instead of armor. It might show up at the darkest possible moment when you've already given up hope. But it will come. Your job is to be ready to move when it does. When Ruth appeared at that window, I had a choice. I could have stayed frozen on the floor, trapped by the same fear that had kept me prisoner for years. I could have told myself it was too dangerous, too risky, too uncertain. But something inside me, maybe the prayer, maybe my baby, maybe just the survival instinct that every human carries, made me climb. And climbing saved my life. So if you're waiting for a sign, for permission, for the perfect moment to escape the thing that is destroying you, this is it. This is your sign. This is your permission. This is your moment. Reach for the window. Someone is waiting on the other side. I know because I've been there. And I'm still here to tell you about it. Grace is 5 years old now. She has her grandmother's eyes and my stubborn streak, and she laughs so loudly that it fills whatever room she's in. Every night before bed, she asks me to tell her stories, and sometimes I tell her about the brave old woman who lived next door and loved us before she even knew us. Was she an angel? Grace always asks. And I always say the same thing. I don't know, sweetheart, but she was close enough. If my story touched something inside you, I need you to do something for me. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. You might know someone who is hiding bruises under long sleeves. You might know someone whose smile doesn't reach their eyes anymore. You might know someone who has become slowly invisible in a relationship that is swallowing them whole. They need to know they are not alone. They need to know that escape is possible. They need to know that sometimes, in the darkest moments, when everything seems hopeless and lost, miracles happen. Prayers are answered. Angels show up in slippers. And the fire that was meant to destroy us becomes the light that sets us free. If you are in danger right now, please reach out to a domestic violence hotline in your country. Tell someone what's happening. Let someone help you make a plan. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve a life where you are not afraid to walk through your own front door. And if you're the Ruth in someone else's story, if you have a neighbor, a friend, a family member who you suspect is suffering in silence, please don't stay quiet. Knock on the door. Slide a note in the mailbox. Let them know someone sees them. Because sometimes that's all it takes. One knock. One note. One moment of courage. And a life is saved from the fire. That's my story. That's Grace's story. That's Ruth's story, still rippling out into the world 3 years after she took her last breath. And maybe, just maybe, it's about to become your story too. Thank you for listening until the end. You're not alone. Not tonight. Not ever again.